Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video we're going to be doing an overview of scrapers. Hope you enjoy. What this video is not is going to be common scrapers like this style that's got just a razor blade in the end there, a window scraper or something like that. Now there are also other types that have longer handles and things like that are called cabinet scrapers, and we're not going to be covering that today. I'm just going to be covering the very basics. We're going to be covering basic card scrapers, cabinet scraper. This one's in the number 80 cabinet scraper style, and then we're going to look at scraper planes. So the card scraper is the most basic of scrapers that you can get. It is essentially just a piece of rectangular, square, or sometimes even odd shaped ones like this, but they're just a punched piece of steel that has a square side into the edge so that you can roll what's called a burr. So what is a burr? Well, if you look just up here, a burr is an extruded piece of steel that is actually curved over the square edge, and that's what takes your shaving or your scraping. To do that, you require something like a burnisher like I've got here. There's a lot of different varieties out there. This is just the most basic style, and the most important thing is the steel has to be harder than the steel of your scraper to actually fold that burr over. Now, when it comes to the rectangular style here, you can actually have a burr on the four corners. You could put it on this edge here if you wanted to, but then that's going to get in the way when you hold it, and so I wouldn't recommend that. They come in thicker steel like this and much thinner steel like this one, and you can see how much more flexible that is. And as I said before, it also comes in these curved shapes, which is great for getting into spoon bowls and odd shapes, and you can see that it's kind of an S curve. It allows you to choose the section you want for whatever curve you've got to get that scrape to happen. In general, scraper is used where you've got reversing grain, rough grain, or any grain where you're getting tear out using a hand plane. And that would be more common than you would think, but sometimes you can get away with using the hand plane if it's adjusted right to prevent that tear out, and then you might not need the scraper. If you're going to use a scraper, that would be the final finish on a surface, or if you've already done a final planing and then you get a little bit of tear out, you can just spot adjust with scrapers, particularly hand scrapers like these. If you're only using it in a small spot, these are going to do the job as long as you're only doing a small amount. Now, I'm not getting a very big shaving off this because this actually needs to be resharpened. If you want to flex it more, the thinner one is a little bit easier, and if you've got less strength, the thinner one's a little bit easier because you can flex it and then guide the spot that you want with it quite a bit easier, which is one of the downsides of using these. You've got to have quite a bit of strength, especially with the thicker ones, to actually hold your thumbs in here to flex it and to keep operating. Now, the other thing you get in operation is, this is metal. You're dragging a piece of metal across the surface of a piece of wood. You're generating friction, which is generating a lot of heat, and this becomes a giant heat sink. It holds the heat, and you will burn your thumbs if you use them for a long period of time. I have seen some people put magnets on the back here, and that can help, but I've still found that the magnets slide around a bit and the heat can still transfer through that. And that is where we move into the next type of scraper, the cabinet scraper. Now, cabinet scraper in name, generally it would have been used by a cabinet maker who's going to be maybe using this on a larger area, but the main advantage you have with one of these is that you have some nice handles to hold it with, you've got an area to rest your thumbs, and because it's resting in this giant heat sink of cast iron, you have no problem with build-up of heat on your thumbs, so you're not going to burn your thumbs, allowing you to use this for a longer period of time. The other advantage of this is you start to have a little bit of a sole, and so that's giving you a little bit of reference for where you might be using it, and maybe a little bit more control for not digging it in, because if you're using a scraper, you might be digging it in and take too much out of one little tiny spot, and having this smaller referencing might mean that that's less obvious when you come to put finish on there, because you're kind of keeping it a little bit flatter as it goes. So when it comes to the scraper on a cabinet scraper, we can see it's vastly different in its size. It's definitely a lot smaller, but you probably already guessed that from the size of it. Now, reason being is we don't need to actually hold it and flex it, so we don't need that extra size to actually hold. because it's got its own fixed thing with handles, so we've already got a way to hold it, so we don't need the scraper itself to do that. The other difference is this blade is a much thicker blade, and I think you can see in the reflection there that this has a bevel along here, and what that's doing is thinning it out to a point on this flat side here so you can turn that burr, because as I said, with the card scraper you need a flat top and a flat edge, which is giving you like a sharp corner. Well, the same thing can happen here. You could sharpen even a plain blade, you could do this with, essentially, because you have that nice sharp edge with no light reflecting off, so that can actually turn a burr over, and when you're sharpening a hand plane you do get a burr on that bevel anyway, so we know that happens, and that's what's getting used in the cabinet scraper. So now I've got the scraper back in the plane or the cabinet scraper holder. We're going to come back down here and I'll show you how we can use this one, and that it's much easier to actually use a scraper like this because there's no stress on the thumbs and it's all pushing and you don't generate that heat that you did. So let's come down here and we'll have a look at it. So with the card scraper I told you that had to use your thumbs to flex this scraper, and that's true. It's no different with the cabinet scraper. It's essentially just a thicker blade being held, and we've got to do the same process. Now on the cabinet scraper we have this little screw here which allows you to flex it, and that allows you to come in here, as you can see just here, and we're going to take little shavings, as we can see here. And that is essentially how this one works. You can see once again, because it's curved, as that shaving is coming out here, it's coming out right in the center. So once again, curving it is taking these corners out of play. Because we don't have the restrictions that we had with the card scraper, we can actually use it for a lot longer, much easier, and it's just much quicker and easier to operate. You don't have to worry about finding flat or anything like that because of this sole. It does all the referencing for you, and that's as easy as it is to get that area done. We're going to move on, and say we were taking this and we had the same issue or similar issue to with the card scraper, and we were worried about taking a whole lot out of one little tiny area, and maybe it was noticeable after we put our finish on our furniture. That's where the scraper plane comes into play. Now, the scraper plane, as you can see, is a lot bigger. It's got much more of a reference sole. This particular one has rosewood on the bottom. There are other ones that just have the steel on the bottom, similar to the cabinet scraper. And if we look at the scraper on this, it's much bigger. We can see that it's actually larger and longer than the one that was even in the cabinet scraper. And the one in the cabinet scraper probably would have come up to here. Now if we look at this one, it's not quite as thick as the one that's in the cabinet scraper. This one is still a little bit thicker. It's probably about half the size thicker than my thickest card scraper. And once again, it has that bevel on the top to thin it out to allow the curl of that burr. So it's held in the scraper plane. It allows us to do our job. The one difference with the scraper plane is obviously it's got more size, more reference, so you can actually keep your scraping flatter. But we can adjust the angle of this one, which changes the attack of the burr and how aggressive or less aggressive it actually is by this head unit that locks it in, rotating back and forwards. And we'll cover that in its own dedicated video, because there was quite a bit of working out I had to do to work out the right kind of angles, and so I'm going to do that in its own video so you get a better understanding of how that works. So we're going to jump back down here to the vise and I'll show you how this one operates. Now, as you can imagine, it's going to operate pretty much the same as what we've already seen. Just need to make sure that the scraper is pushed right in, and you can hear that sound hopefully. That's it barely touching the surface, and that's going over an area we went with the other scraper, but it's bridging the surface. So you can see here we're taking out this feather fine stuff right now. There you have it, folks. I hope that gives you a better understanding of what a scraper is, whether it's in a holder or by itself as a card scraper, and perhaps what we can do with these scrapers. So coming up, I want to do some more nuanced videos, and I'm going to do a dedicated video on the card scraper, the scraper plane, and the cabinet scraper. And in those videos I'm going to be showing you how to turn the burr correctly, how to set them up and adjust them to use them the way you might want. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing down below. While you're down there, please sound off in the comments. Did you like this video? Did you like this introduction to scrapers? Were you aware of the various types of scrapers and how you use them? Or did this video help you out? Please let me know down below. I'd very much appreciate the feedback. And if you'd like to support me a little bit further, please consider checking me out on Instagram, also on Patreon. And if you'd like to see another great video such as this one today, please check out the 3 up here for the dedicated videos on both the card scraper, scraper plane, and cabinet scraper, which will all end up here once those videos are released. Bye for now.